Hi, and welcome to episode 20 of the Trail Encounters. And today we're going to talk about a topic that is under fire right now. It just seems that it's very hard to get to what truth is. So that's our topic for today.
Yeah, in a lot of ways, truth is something that growing up, we kind of just assumed. You would look at an encyclopedia or read the newspaper, and that was truth. Because, who would lie, right? I mean, growing up, it was always like this thing of well, you trusted your teachers, or you trusted what your parents said, or you trusted in the truth being something that everyone kind of agreed upon. Mm-hmm. And that's kind of changed over the years. We began to question the motivations behind what we were told as truth. Mm-hmm. And so we began to ask questions of media, of books, of experts, those kinds of things. And you've seen that a lot, Stacy, I think. Mm-hmm. But today, even more so with social media, I think truth can be hidden in plain sight.
Okay, what do you mean by that?
Well, there's an episode of The Office, the American Office, where Michael Scott learns something about a coworker named Stanley.
Right.
And Stanley doesn't want him to tell, but Michael Scott likes to get into the office gossip, so he tells everybody. And he's like, oh, I can't take it back. I've told everybody. So what I'll do is I'll send a bunch of lies out there as well. And then no one will know which of all these lies is the one truth. So you kind of hide truth amongst all these lies. Mm-hmm. And in some ways, I kind of see that going on today on social media. There's just so much information. How do you pick out of it what truth is?
Right. Well, and I even remember a sitcom called Spin City, and I was like, what does that mean? Mm-hmm. But people spin whatever topic they want to spin to make it look one way or another. And so that's become really a big thing in truth. Right,
yeah, there's the truth, but then how you spin the truth, and then what gets spun isn't the truth anymore and stuff like that. So now this, by the way, isn't a new question. This didn't just come up in the last 10 years, right? So if you go back to the biblical period, Pilate at Jesus' trial asks this question, what is truth? Right? And so here 2,000 years ago, Pilate clearly looks at Jesus and says, what is truth? Mm-hmm. And we'll come back to that here in just a minute. But when you look at this question of truth, and what Pilate was after was he wanted something real. Right? What is true? And what does that look like? Because today, also in our culture, we have truth on a spectrum. Mm-hmm. So on one side of the spectrum, you have what we call maybe a subjective truth. Mm-hmm. A truth that depends on my perspective.
Right.
How I see the world.
This is my truth.
Yeah, this is my truth, or I'm living my truth. Mm-hmm. As if somehow truth is centered on how I see the world. Mm-hmm. Well, that's really opinion, right? That's really perspective. That's not truth. Truth would be something outside of you, outside of me, something bigger than both of us that we can both look to and say, that's true, which would be objective truth. Mm-hmm. So subjective truth is, to me, opinion.
Right.
It's personal. Objective truth is the real, what I consider truth. Mm-hmm. The Greek word aletheia, which would mean a fact, historical fact. It's true, that we all look at it and say it's true. A good example would be, let's say we got a big old jar of M&Ms, mm-hmm. right? Which are bad for you, by the way. Don't eat M&Ms. But you get a big old jar of M&Ms. Yeah. And you can count them, right? You can count up how many M&Ms are in the jar. That's objective truth. But if you said, my favorite color is green, or the yellow ones are the best, mm-hmm. well, that's a subjective opinion. Mm-hmm. I'm not even going to call it subjective truth at this point. It's subjective. I like the blue ones. They taste better. I don't know how that's true or not, but...
Right, and that's what's so interesting is things that we know to be true are being put in our face that, no, it can be different because I believe it's different.
Right. Yeah, like you said earlier, I'm living my truth. Mm-hmm. Well, how does that affect me? How's that related to a truth? That kind of thing.
But are these questions about God objective today? I mean, they do seem pretty subjective.
Right, and that's where I think, even for me, this is a difficult conversation. Mm-hmm. That's why I want to have it, right? Because the reality is, there is an objective truth, period. God made the universe. And we may not understand how that happened. Jesus came as God's Son. May not understand how all that happened. The universe is huge and complex and finely tuned. Don't understand how all that happened. Quantum mechanics is a reality. Don't understand how that happened. 1 + 1 equals 2. Understand that one. My point is that there is this objective truth. But how do we understand it? How do we see it? That does vary between different people.
Right.
And so we begin to say that, well, it's subjective because that's how I understand it.
Well, and different religions would agree differently on who created the world and that sort of thing. So.
Right. And that would be subjective in their understanding of it. So, for example, Barna did a study years ago, it's still pretty true, that 75% of Americans, 3/4 of us, see our faith as subjective, that it depends on your experience, which is in some ways true. We do experience God differently. We experience the world around us differently. However, that doesn't change the reality underneath that there is an objective truth. So I guess, Stacy, there's a humility in the process. It's an understanding that there's a truth that I don't fully understand,
Right.
but I trust God with. So St. Anselm years ago said that he wanted to understand, but in order to understand, he needed to trust in God. He said basically, there's a faith that seeks understanding. I am not going to fully understand the universe, the God of the universe, the God who created all of these things, because I'm part of the creation. I'm part of the system. So I can't understand beyond the system. So by faith, I trust the God who created all this to show me truth. Faith seeking understanding.
Right.
So the question then is, do we have the humble approach to truth? Or are we more set on our ways of understanding it? So my subjective views of things becomes objective because it's my truth. Does that make sense, kind of?
It does, yeah.
We turn the subjective things into objective things, and instead of being humble and approaching them as an objective truth.
Right. And honestly, I think that really truth in general leans more subjective because we all want things to be the way we see it. You know?
Right. Or to understand it. Or even we want to have certain behaviors, so we change the truth to fit our behaviors. Right? Is this, instead of humbly seeking what God would want, the creator of the universe, we try to shape the creator into what we want. And in the Old Testament, that's considered idolatry, right? You make the idol fit what you want to be done. Make God in your image, so to speak. And we've done that with truth. I make truth fit my image, and therefore it's my truth, and therefore it is true. It's like, well, no, there's still a truth, is a God.
Right.
Okay.
And I imagine we won't ever really come to a consensus until the last days when Jesus returns and
That's what Paul
God
said.
explains it all.
Yeah, that's what Paul said. Paul said, we see through a glass as dimly. We don't understand everything, right? But then he says, we'll be fully known and we'll fully know. And so in the interim, we have faith seeking understanding. We want to understand the objective truth. That's what Pilate was after.
So I
So
was wondering how that kind of comes together into Pilate.
yeah, so in chapter 18 of John's Gospel, Jesus is on trial. Why is he on trial? Well, technically, it's because he said he'd destroy the temple and raise it again in 3 days, because he said he was the Messiah. The reality is he's on trial because of his authority, of who he says he has authority to speak, and that is through God, that he has God's authority. That's what the real issue is. So they bring him to Pilate, and Pilate knows that he hasn't done anything worthy of death. And he tries to get Jesus off, exchange him for Barabbas. He tries to talk with him. He tries to wash his hands of the situation. But the crowds won't let him. And so finally he comes to Jesus and he talks to Jesus one more time. He says, "Are you a king?" And then Jesus says this. So in John 18, verse 37, Jesus replies to Pilate asking about being a king. "You say that I am a king. For this I was born, and for this I came into the world, to testify to the truth. Everyone who belongs to the truth listens to my voice."
This is confusing because it seems that Jesus doesn't really answer Pilate's question.
Yeah, I think we read it all together. And so Pilate asks, "Are you a king?" And Jesus is like, "You say that I'm a king." And then he kind of changes direction. He says, "You know what? Why I came was not to be a king, was not to be a ruler, was not to have power and authority. I came to tell the truth." And the truth trumps all those things.
Right.
It's over power, it's over authority, it's over all that, because it is the one thing that's solid, that doesn't go away. It's the truth. And so Jesus says, "I've come to bring truth." So the big question is, what is this truth that is bigger than being a king? What is this truth that's bigger than power and authority and all the things that the world is after? And so to look at that, we're going to take a look at some passages from the New Testament that talk about what is truth. So in John chapter 1, verse 14, it says, "And the Word became flesh," talking about Jesus, "and lived among us. And we have seen his glory, the glory as of a Father's only Son, full of grace and truth." In John chapter 1, verse 17, "The law indeed was given through Moses. Grace and truth came through Jesus Christ." Chapter 14, verse 6, Jesus said to him, "I am the way, the truth, and the life." So in all these passages, what is truth? He is truth. I am the way, the truth, and the life. The Word comes in truth. Jesus himself is truth, which means that God is truth. So the truth isn't a concept, it's a person.
So you don't think of it as the things that he says, that somehow it's him?
I think they go together, right? Jesus is called the Word. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God. So what he says and who he is are the same thing. Because remember, the word "word" in Greek, logos, is much bigger than the things we say. It's wisdom, but it's also the power of creation, right? How did God create the world? He spoke it into existence. When I speak words, my interior thoughts, which don't exist, become part of the real, actual world around me, right? What is invisible becomes visible in what I speak. So there's a power in the Word. So he is the Word, and the Word is truth, and he is truth. So truth is centered on Jesus and, of course, God, the Trinity. That the reality is who God is, who created all these things and created the world around us. So a very, very powerful statement here that the truth isn't a concept or even a belief. It's a person. And everything drives back to that reality. And then, by the way, in Ephesians chapter 4, Paul says this, "For surely you have heard about him, and were taught in him," speaking of Jesus, "as truth is in Jesus." So again, that's Paul too, not just John's gospel, but the New Testament talks about Jesus as truth. Again, it's a person. It is personal. It's the reality of the one who created the world and has redeemed us.
Right. And that affects how we live as well.
Absolutely. In fact, Jesus says this in John 8. He says, "If you continue in my word," which we've just talked about, Jesus' word is him, "you are truly my disciples, and you will know the truth, and the truth will make you free." Again, we see this a lot in TV, in movies. If the truth will set you free. But they never tell you what the truth is. Like, is it my truth, your truth, whose truth? Well, no, the truth, a truth, and you're free. What Jesus is saying here is really powerful. He said, if you continue in my word, what I have taught, who I am, your belief in me, your trusting in me, you'll be my disciples. And as followers of me, knowing that truth, you'll be set free. Not from Rome or political oppression or the government, but you're set free from yourself. You're set free from your sin. You're set free to this objective truth of who I am, of my household, my kingdom, and the reality of the world as it was created. You are set free to have a relationship with a God who loves you and wants what's best for you, to become part of his household, to become children of God. You are truly set free for that, because you'll know the objective reality, the objective truth of who he is and what the world really is. And that's what sets you free.
I love that.
So there's a really great example of this in John chapter 9. One of my favorite stories in the Bible, story of the man born blind.
Mm-hmm.
So in this story, there's a man born blind, and Jesus heals him.
Right.
In kind of a strange way.
Yeah, he makes mud pies.
He makes mud pies, right? He makes mud pies and puts it on this guy's eyes and tells him to go and wash.
Mm-hmm.
Which is kind of strange, right? Because Jesus could just heal him or just say something, but we don't have that. He literally spits in the ground, makes mud, and puts it on this guy's eyes and tells him to go wash. But the issue is, it's the Sabbath. And making mud would be considered work.
Very interesting.
Right, which is kind of the underlying story here.
Right.
But I'm interested in this guy because he goes, he washes, he comes back, and he can see.
Mm-hmm.
And people begin to recognize the fact that that guy was blind like yesterday, and now he can see. So like, what is the deal?
Well, and I find it interesting that people are like, well, there was another guy who looked kind of like him. It's not him. You know, they were trying to make every excuse in the book to discount what happened.
Exactly, right? So what's the truth of this story? This guy was blind, and now he can see. That's the objective truth, right? He couldn't see, now he can see. What we're going to see around this story then is a lot of the same things we see today that circle around truth. So just take a look at verse 8. The neighbors and those who had seen him before as a beggar began to ask, "Is this not the man who used to sit and beg?" Some were saying, "It is he." Others were saying, "No, but it is someone like him." He kept saying, "I am the man."
Can you imagine? Like, no, it's me.
So here's the thing. What is the one thing that no one's doing yet, Stacy?
They're not celebrating that now he can see. That's crazy to me.
Yeah, there's a guy who was blind, can't see. Like, no, that can't be him. It's like, no, it's me. I couldn't see, now I can see. Mm-hmm. And no one's like, hey, that's great. It's exciting. You know, they don't do that, right? And so, yeah, the first thing is they're kind of denying, in a sense, that this even happened. Which, by the way, I mean, you can understand, right? There's something about miracles that bring fear. And I know it sounds kind of weird, but when we pray for someone to be healed, there's also a sense of, if God does it, and you know that God did it, there is a power there that is, in a way, terrifying. I mean, you're excited and you're glad that this healing was done, but God did that, which means that God is real and active in the world and
powerful.
And powerful, and holy cow, what do I do with that in my life? Like, so there's a terrifying in this when God acts. Like in the book of Isaiah, when Isaiah is called by God, the first thing he does when he sees God is hit the deck, and he's like, "I am unclean. Oh my goodness!" He falls to the ground because of the power and presence of God is there. And so, in some ways, it's almost easier to say, "No, that didn't happen. God can't be involved in that way," because it's kind of terrifying. But the objective truth can be.
Right.
So he shows up. So instead of believing him, right, they begin to ask questions like, who did this and how did this happen? So look at verse 11. He answered, "The man called Jesus made mud, spread it on my eyes, and said to me, 'Go to Siloam and wash.' Then I went and washed and received my sight." They said to him, "Where is he?" I said, "I do not know." So all he does is retell the story. He's like, this is exactly what happened. Objective truth. And they don't believe him. Like, well, where's the guy? So they begin looking for excuses or sidelight discussions. And I think we see this a lot when we talk about truth. Like, yeah, but, and they add some sidelight issue that is, or something on the side, right? As opposed to dealing with the actual issue. The actual issue is, couldn't see, now I could see. But where's the guy who did it? Like, well, what about me? I kind of couldn't see, now I can see, right? So that's part of it too.
I don't know. I'd be looking for Jesus too. Like, oh, I want to go find the guy who can make blind see.
And by the way, so like, where is Jesus? Because in this story, he kind of leaves the guy. He comes back at the end. After all this, when you finish the story, Jesus will come back at the end. But it's almost like Jesus allows this to happen to show us how truth can be seen in our world and how we can stand up for truth. because Jesus goes away and leaves this guy to kind of fend for himself. And the guy does an amazing job, by the way. Not to ruin the story for you, but that's kind of the idea. So instead of celebrating with these guys, they turn them over to the Pharisees, to the leaders, because a miracle has happened. So instead of believing him or trusting him, the objective truth of, I couldn't see, now I can see.
Or even just believing their own eyes.
Exactly. They go to the Pharisees. In verse 15, this is what happens. Then the Pharisees also began to ask how he had received his sight. He said to them, he put mud on my eyes, then I washed, and now I see. So here again, what does he do? He simply tells the story. This is the objective truth of what happened. He told me to do this. I did it. This is the result. Very simple. However, the Pharisees don't want to deal with that either. Verse 18. The Jews did not believe that he had been blind and had received his sight until they called the parents of the man who had received his sight and asked them, is this your son, who you say was born blind? How then does he now see? So first off, by the way, they don't believe that he was blind. So we've got to check that box off, right? So the fact that he was blind and can see, we got to prove that he was blind to begin with. So they call the parents in. His parents answered, we know that this is our son, and that he was born blind. But we do not know how it is that he now sees, nor do we know who opened his eyes. Ask him, he is of age. He will speak for himself. His parents said this because they were afraid of the Jews. So to me, Stacy, it's like the parents throw this kid under the bus. I mean, I know that they're afraid of being kicked out of the synagogue. That's their fear. I totally understand that.
Which is a big thing back then.
Huge thing. It's like being kicked out of your community. But why would they be kicked out? What's the reason they get kicked out?
For telling the truth.
So then, what's the community based on?
Whatever they think that they're supposed to be doing.
Exactly. And is that a community worth being part of? So, I mean, the reality is they were so focused on staying in the community that they're willing to overlook the objective truth that their son, who was blind, and they know he was blind, can now see, and they know he can see. Now, again, how that happens, they're right. They don't know. They weren't there. But their son said this happened. Do they not trust their son to tell the truth?
Well, he can see now. You would think that that would be clear.
Exactly. And so, again, now we see everyone's kind of ganging up against this guy, including his parents, right? The people in the streets, the Pharisees, the Jewish leadership, they're all kind of ganging up on him. And all he's done is said, I couldn't see. Jesus said to do this. I did that. Now I can see. Simple truth. He didn't embellish it, try to make things up. He just simply told what happened. That's all he's doing. And again, part of when we talk about Jesus, we're telling the truth as we best know it, right? In a humble way to say, this is the truth that we understand to be true. That's all we're doing. And yet you see that when truth shows up sometimes, how it gets attacked. Because the truth reveals things that maybe are hidden. Like, what are the Pharisees really worried about? What are the parents really worried about? What's really their agenda? And the truth reveals those things. That's why it's so powerful. Okay. So then going on, in verse 24, they call the young men back again. So for the second time, they called the man who had been blind. And they said to him, give glory to God. We know that this man is a sinner. Talking about Jesus. Which, by the way, when they say, we know this man is a sinner, is that an objective truth?
I wouldn't think so.
Right. So they're saying, we have this truth that we believe that Jesus is a sinner. So how they make it objective? Like they said, this is the truth. So your truth can't be true because it conflicts with our truth.
Which we find that in everything. That's the problem.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So that's why the truth itself, the objective truth, is so important. That's what Pilate is asking. What is truth? Because it trumps everything else, right? So he answered, I do not know whether he is a sinner. One thing I do know, that though I was blind, now I see. And so that's his objective truth. That's all he's doing. He's simply telling the story. I was blind, now I can see. And that is the part that's upsetting them so much. So in verse 26, we kind of want to finish the story here. They said to him, "What did he do to you? How did he open your eyes?" He answered, "I have told you already, and you would not listen. Why do you want to hear it again? Do you also want to become his disciples?" Now, by the way, Stacy, love that. He's like kind of throwing it right back at him. It's like, why do you want to know? Like, do you want to believe in him too?
Now he's really poking the bear.
He's kind of poking the bear here, which I kind of really love, right? In the sense that they want to know how it happened. How it happened really is irrelevant to the fact that it did happen. Right? They're trying to discredit what happened by making an excuse about it was done incorrectly. It was done on the Sabbath. And since it was done on the Sabbath, Jesus is a sinner, which means it couldn't have happened, but it did happen. Or that it did happen, it was somehow invalid because of how it was done.
Right, because only God can heal like that. So they're questioning preconceived notions.
Yeah, which is the objective truth, which he's going to get to. So you're right there with him. He says this, "Then they reviled him, saying, 'You are his disciple, but we are disciples of Moses. We know that God has spoken to Moses. But as for this man, we do not know where he comes from.' The man answered, 'Here's an astonishing thing. You do not know where he comes from, and yet he opened my eyes. We know that God does not listen to sinners, but he does listen to one who worships him and obeys his will. Never since the world began has it been heard that anyone opened the eyes of a person born blind. If this man were not from God, he could do nothing.' They answered him, 'You were born entirely in sins, and you're trying to teach us?' And they drove him out."
I love that. It's like, so they weren't in sin? That's interesting.
So here, all he does is look at the evidence. I was born blind, now I can see. God had to do this, right? For this to happen, God had to have done this. The person who did this has to be from God, because otherwise he couldn't do this.
Right.
So your argument to them makes no sense. And that's what he says. And their response, they kick him out, right? He gives the truth, and rather than let the truth speak to them, rather than let that shape their lives, they simply kick him out, which again happens today as well. When people are faced with the truth, if they don't want to confront the truth or accept the truth or even look at the truth for what it is, they just push it aside and ignore it because they don't want to deal with it. And that's what I said earlier on. There is a humility in our search for truth. We can't go at it with a set of blinders on or limit it to what we want it to be. There's a humility in our approach to truth that's willing to learn and to grow, and that trusts in God to help show us what that truth is.
Yeah, and that's the hard part right now with what's going on in the world is so many people have just closed their ears, and that if you don't agree with me, nothing you have to say is of interest or the truth.
Yeah, in fact, when Jesus was telling his parables, he said, you'll listen but never hear. You'll see but not understand. And there's a sense to that too, is that we may hear the word and see what God is doing, but if we don't humble ourselves to understand it, humble ourselves to learn from it, then we block it off. We don't pay attention to it. And again, saw it same in Isaiah chapter 6, same thing, where the people have become so blinded to the truth that they can't see, which by the way happens in the story. The man who was blind can see, but those who could see, the Pharisees and the leaders, become blind.
Blind to the truth of what Jesus did.
Exactly. Even the fact that they're in front of them, they have blinded themselves to what has happened because of their own notions of what they see as important to them, or their own quote-unquote truth, if you will.
Well, knowing the truth and following Jesus does change your life.
Yeah, and that's where Jesus talks about, the truth will set you free.
Yeah,
You're
I do
free,
love that.
Yeah, you're free to live in this world knowing this truth. Now, here again, do we understand everything about the truth of Jesus? No. Do we understand everything about the truth of God? No. We are humbly seeking to learn more about that truth, and we rely upon the Spirit of God to help teach us that truth.
Right.
We also have the Scriptures. to help teach us that truth. If we're truly seeking to know the truth, to be set free, then it takes time and effort, humbly, to learn that truth and to know in a deeper way who God is and who Jesus is, to walk with him, to get to know him more deeply, and to be his disciples.
Absolutely, and that's part of why we also created the trail, which is different than the trail encounters. It is a walk through the Bible, typically in a year if you keep up with it every day. But Frank does a podcast part of it that explains some of the scriptures themselves. And then we have a book that goes along with it that just helps keep you on track with God's Word and kind of paralleling different scriptures. I think you do such a great job with that. I love it when I'm the one who does the editing, so if you see any issues, let me know. But Frank is able to take the different scriptures and how they connect and put them in perspective for you. So it's really a great program, and you can do it for free online at purpose-press.com. You can go and do it there. If you're interested in the book, it does create a great legacy for your kids or your family to have your questions, your insights, and all that as well. So, but overall, learning these scriptures is so important, especially Jesus. What he talks about is just amazing, and I think just brings us closer to the truth.
Yeah, I want to say this one more time before we end today. When we talk about truth, I think sometimes it comes across as kind of potentially an arrogant thing, like we're telling you the truth, and that's not our intention here. Our intention is to point you to Jesus, who is the truth, and to try to do that in the most humble way possible. That, again, we don't have all the answers by far. No one does. But we humbly try and we seek God to say, help reveal yourself to us so that we can help reveal you to others. That's the goal. And we should make the effort to do that as people, to study, to learn, to grow, prayerfully, humbly seeking to know the truth. And that truth is found in Jesus.
Absolutely. Thank you for joining us today, and we would really appreciate it if you would like and subscribe and let people know what we're doing here.
And until next time, stay on the trail.